What's up YouTube, Brian here, back again with another rod review, and today we are taking a look at a more affordable rod, unlike my usual rod reviews. Today we are looking at the $200 price point St. Croix Victory 7.3 Heavy? Question mark? So we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but first off I want to give a shout out to Tackle Trap, which supplied me with this rod. I will leave links in the description where you can pick up these Victories right now as of this video dropping, where they are currently in stock. I do have some codes available down in my comments as well that may or may not work on these rods, so if you want to pick up the Victory rods and this specific rod, the 7.3 medium heavy, just check the link down in the description and you'll see where you can get them. Now, I already did a video a while back on the Victory around the launch time. Since then to now, I've actually had a lot of time to use this 7.3 heavy bait casting rod. They are calling this rod the full contact finesse. So I know I said some stuff about these rods in my previous video, so I'll just recap a little bit. Number one, these rods are made in the Park Falls, Wisconsin factory. So these are USA made $200 price point rods. These are a new line to the St. Croix family as of this summer. It initially launched with I think like 8 or 9 models. They teased a whole bunch of new models that are coming out in the Victory season at ICAST this year. When those models are actually going to hit stores, who knows? Supply chain issues and guides and all this stuff is still really messed up with COVID. So I wouldn't expect the new versions of these rods to be hitting stores anytime soon, but you can still pick up a lot of the models in the initial launch. Now, I picked up this 7.3 Heavy because this is a new model in the St. Croix line. So St. Croix, much like Shimano, much like Daiwa, much like G. Loomis, they like to kind of make the same blanks through all of their rod lines, like the 7.4 Heavy. You can get it in the Bass X, you can get it in the Avid X, you can get it in the Legend Extreme. So when St. Croix dropped some new models, I was quick to try and grab them and check them out. So this 7.3 Heavy is considered the, to me, it's kind of a clone in a lot of ways of the NRX 873, which in my opinion is a great thing because this is only $200 and the 873 NRX is like $600 now. So let's talk about this rod. First off, the things I don't like about it. So I usually bag a lot on St. Croix, so I'm going to get that stuff, the negative stuff, a little bit out of the way right away in this rod review. So first off, I don't like the labeling on this rod. This rod is very deceiving. When you shop for this rod, you're going to think it's something it's not. So they consider this rod to be a heavy, but it is only rated to 7/8 of an ounce, which is a super weird rating. It's not even rated to a full ounce. So in my opinion, you can't have a heavy power rod that is rated under an ounce. That's just ridiculous. Now, actually using this rod over the last couple months, I would say that this is an actual real life medium heavy. This is a medium heavy rod. I have many medium heavy rods that are rated up to an ounce that feel a lot like this rod as far as power and action. Like for instance, the 7.2 medium heavy X-Pride, very similar to this rod. The St. Croix the NRX Plus 873 is similar to this rod, although it's a little more powerful. This rod is a little spongier, however, it's very similar in taper and action. So to me, this is not a heavy. If you buy this rod thinking that you're going to be able to pitch ½ ounce to 3/4 ounce jigs, or you're going to be able to flip like ½ ounce to 1 ounce or even 3/4 ounce Texas rigs, this is not a flipping stick. This is not a heavy Texas rig stick. This is not for throwing heavy jigs. You're going to have a bad time throwing like a 3/4 ounce jig with a trailer on this thing. A ½ ounce you can definitely do, but anything higher than that, it's going to be a little overpowered. This thing has a really spongy top or tip, and we're going to talk about the action on that in a little bit. But so first off, don't like that they call this a heavy. St. Croix rods are kind of squishy and soft. This rod is no exception. The taper on this thing has a really, really soft tip. Now they call this, the other thing I don't like about the labeling is they call this an extra fast. This is, I don't know what planet this is an extra fast, because this rod bends all the way down to, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. About the 8th guide is where the bend kind of shuts off, like right about the 7th guide. So this tip is soft. This is a very, very, very spongy tip. This is not, in my opinion, an extra fast. So you got to take the fast and extra fast ratings with St. Croix with a grain of salt, because their tips are typically softer than normal. So that being said, to call this a heavy action rod with an extra fast tip is insane. This is a medium heavy rod with a fast to almost even a moderate action in certain applications. So that's first off. Now, number two, the other thing is the grip. So the grip on this thing, they put some EVA foam right in the middle and an EVA lock nut. Now, this grip feels great. I really like this grip. It's a Fuji off-the-shelf grip. Feels great in a hand. However, I will say that the threading, the plastic thread behind the lock nut is very sharp. So when I first got this rod and I was putting some different reels on it, like I was putting a Tatula on it and I was putting like some Shimano reels on it, my finger would rub on that really sharp piece of the exposed thread and it felt really uncomfortable. It was like biting into my finger. It was very, very pointy. So I actually took a file and filed that sharp edge down, and now it's totally fine. So I had to make a slight modification to make sure that the little thread on the back of the lock nut, or the little thread where the lock nut slides down onto, was not cutting my finger. That was very annoying. Fixed it, fine sense. So I will say that so on the negatives is the markings on this is not, I don't like calling this a heavy. The naming on this thing, they call it a full contact finesse. Who the hell knows what that means? Full contact finesse. You're calling a heavy action rod a finesse rod, but full contact. The naming convention doesn't make any sense. I think Megabass does great naming on rods. Other companies like ALX, they do great naming on rods. St. Croix, don't name your rods. You guys suck at it. This is not a I don't know what that means. Full contact finesse. Another rod's called like the General. Just knock it off. Don't name your rods. Don't try to be like Megabass. You're not that good at it. Moving forward, let's talk about the things I like about this rod. So when I first got this rod, I was like, I thought originally this was going to be a good frogging rod. I'm like, oh, they did a 7.3 heavy that maybe has a little soft tip. This is an open water frogging rod at best. You cannot frog with heavy cover on this. The tip is way too soft. If you hook up into a fish in like some reeds or some lily pads or some really heavy mats, you're not getting out. That fish is going to win every time on this rod. So this is not a flipping stick, not a heavy pitching stick, not a frogging stick. What is this rod good at? Well, I have found two things that this rod is fantastic at. Number one, and what I have it rigged up right now. Now, I have a Shimano Aldebaran on here. I'm sorry, Shimano Metanium, a 2016 Metanium on here, and this is the reel I've been using most of the time on this rod. This is a fantastic grass fishing Texas rig rod. Now, what I liked about this rod is I was throwing, this is what I got rigged up right now, Texas rigs, either a 1/4 ounce or a 3/8 ounce Texas rig pegged with a creature bait. And in Minnesota, we have a lot of coontail and we have a lot of milfoil. And flipping cover, like grass, in like 6, like even up shallow, like 4 or 5 feet down to like 20 feet, this rod was so much fun. I had so much fun dragging Texas rigs through deep grass or even shallow grass. And when a fish would bite on this thing, I had no problem finding bites. This thing is very sensitive. For a $200 rod, you're getting right in that $200 sensitivity. I had no problems with fluorocarbon feeling fish hitting my Texas rig in the grass. And because this is a longer rod, you can really crank down and lay into these fish because it's a 7.3. You have a lot of rod to play with. And when you set the hook on like an EWG hook, what I'm using here is a VMC ringed 4/0 HD hook. So when you're setting the hook on these EWG hooks on a fish that's in the grass, because of this soft tip, you could really lay into that fish and pin them and just keep them pinned and get them out of that grass. I thought this rod was so much fun to hook into like 2, 3, 4, even 4 pound fish down in the grass, and getting them out of the grass with this rod was no problem. Because of that soft tip, I had very, very, very few lost fish. The hookup ratio with this rod with fluorocarbon to the ringed hook was phenomenal. I had 90+% land rate on this thing. I mean, it's been great. So this is a phenomenal grass fishing rod. Number 2 that I like this rod for is dragging finesse football jigs. So if you're into like the JDM smaller finesse football jigs, or even like football jigs in that 1/4 to 3/8 to 1/2 ounce range, this is a really great open water finesse football jig dragging rod. You're not going to be dragging like a big 3/4 ounce football jig with a big badass trailer. That's not this rod. But if you're going to be dragging those more like finesse-y, like the Kitech football jigs or the Depths headlocks, or the Riot baits, or even like a Beast Coast. So those little smaller football heads, this thing is awesome, man. Because it's a 7.3 and it's got that soft tip, you can make a really long cast if you have the right reel. Like I was using the Metanium here. If you have the right reel and the right line and the right side bait, like a half-ounce football jig, you can really make long casts and then do that whole dragging the bait along the bottom. And when you do feel a bite, because this rod is longer and has that more parabolic tip, you can really lean into a hook set on a football jig and keep that fish pinned. So I really like this rod for smallmouth fishing with football jigs. And then I really like this rod for grass fishing with Texas rigs, or even like a 3/8 ounce jig. You could definitely get away flipping grass with jigs in this rod. Not a big jig. I wouldn't do like 5/8 or higher with this thing. I think the sweet spot is at 3/8. Actually, I think 3/8 for any kind of like grass fishing is just the pocket for this rod in particular. I had a 3/8 Texas rig and a 1/4 ounce Texas rig tied on this thing the most. So this is what this rod is good at. If you are a grass fisherman and you're looking for a nice $200 rod to really effectively fish Texas rigs and milfoil, coontail, any kind of offshore grass, hydrilla, that kind of stuff, this is the rod for you. Now, I will say the balance point on this thing is a little tip heavy, but this rod only weighs 4.3 ounces. This rod is very, very light. So even though it's a little tip heavy, even like I threw a Metanium 16. This is not really like a lightweight reel. This reel has a little bit of bulk. It's been perfect. So I really like that the handle on this thing is a little shorter because it made grass pitching and pitching Texas rigs around kind of nice with that slightly shorter handle. You don't need a really big broomstick handle on this rod. So I will say the bounce isn't amazing, which is typical for St. Croix, but because it's light, you throw a nice reel on here that's got a little extra weight, and this thing it's really, really, really easy to fish all day. I did a lot of days where this was like the only rod I was using for hours while I was going down and fishing grass lines, and this thing did great. So pluses is you got the cork. The cork on this thing is not super great, but it's $200. There's a lot of filler on this cork, so I would highly suggest throwing a coat of U40 sealant on this thing to keep that filler from falling out. You're getting a great warranty with St. Croix, so even though it's a $200 price point rod, you're getting a really good warranty. Now, one of the other things we got to talk about is the guides. This rod is using what's called the Concept O Fuji guides, which is a budget guide. So the guides on this thing are nothing special. A lot of $200 price point rods nowadays, you're getting Fuji Alkalite rod guides, which is a big step up from this. So one of the places I think St. Croix cut corners a little bit on this thing is the guides. Now, in practical use every day, do these guides suck? No, they're perfectly fine. I was able to detect bites. This rod feels very sensitive. It makes great casts. But the one downside of this rod, now I haven't personally experienced this, is breakage. I have personally been contacted by someone who has broken this rod on a hook set. And then I have another friend of mine who broke the 7.3 heavy, got a replacement, and then broke the replacement the first time it's gone out. So I know of 3 breakages on this exact model, and the breakages are all in the same area, kind of towards the tip, up in this soft area where the front meets the back. Now, I've caught a lot of northern pike and some bass that were really down in the grass, and I wasn't being light on them. I was horsing them out. So I've put this rod through the ringer in this summer, and I have not had any breakage. However, you're covered with the St. Croix warranty. They'll send you another one. So the warranty is good, but just let you know, I have had many people reach out to me. Well, not many. I've talked to 2 guys. One of them broke 2 of them. One of them broke 1. So there's breakage going out there in the Victory rods. It is what it is. So the negatives, they totally are not selling this rod in the correct way. I wish they would not have called it a full contact finesse. They should have called it something Grass Ninja or something like that, because this rod is fantastic for fishing grass with Texas rigs. Really great at dragging football jigs in open water if you're using smaller football jigs. This could definitely get away with throwing spinnerbaits because of that soft parabolic tip. This could definitely double as a spinnerbait and a buzzbait rod. Because you got that softer tip, you could probably throw 3/8, even maybe half-ounce spinnerbaits and buzzbaits with this thing. Swim jigs, I would have 0 problem throwing a slightly bigger swim jig on this, like a 3/8 ounce swim jig would probably be really great on this. Maybe get away with a 1/4 ounce on this too because of that super soft tip. So I will say that this is a versatile rod, excels at a couple of things. I wouldn't touch a frog with this thing or flipping Anyway, I'm being a little redundant, but overall, I really do like this rod. I was expecting to not like it. I was expecting to say, oh, the 873 NRX is just such a better rod. Honestly, if I sold my 873 NRX and started using this thing for dragging finesse football jigs and for fishing grass and jigs, I'd be perfectly happy. I think this is a great alternative to the NRX 873. It is not as stiff and powerful. The 873 does have more power, but for $200 and basically less than half the price, you're getting the cover band of the NRX 873. So if you got any questions, please leave a comment in the description. If you are an owner of this rod and you've been using it for other techniques that I did not talk about, please let me know in the comments in the description. Check the description for links to where you can pick up this rod if you want to buy it. I like it. I think it's a great grass fishing rod. So it's got my recommendation for that, and I'm probably going to keep it. I'm not going to sell this guy for a little while because I do like having it as a beater rod for flipping some milfoil. So anyway, that's it for this review, and thank you for watching this far. If you're still here, hit like and subscribe, and we'll see you at the next one.